Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Board Games Unlocked, and Brad and I are doing our top 10 buyer's remorse games. Now, what is buyer's remorse? Well, as someone who graduated with a business degree, let me totally mansplain to you. Now, buyer's remorse, basically these are games that we bought and basically regret buying. And we have set a threshold of a minimum of $150. Now, this could be for one game or a group of games or whatever that we basically felt met this criteria. And this is, of course, as usual, we tend to do sad lists, and this is one of those. And I think the main difference of why this list is different from, like, top 10 bad games or just whatever is, for me, it was two stipulations. It was one, the fact that we put in a minimum. $150 is usually a decent chunk of money for any one item. And the other is, well, I mean, so the minimum money basically means we can't pick some shitty $10 game. And the second, for me at least, was that we could do groups. Like if there was a bunch of different versions of it that were of the same game. And that might make a little bit more sense whenever a few of mine get put together. But those were really my stipulations. I don't know if you had any of your own.
That kind of fit mine too. And I will say there's a couple of games on this list that I like the game. It's just I regret spending as much money on it as I did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good.
Like,
I didn't.
It's not like they're my favorite games in the world. I don't mind them, but it's just like there's a few of these I still own.
Interesting.
And actually, maybe hold on. Actually, there's only one of them. One of them I still own.
You still own?
Yeah, but there's games I don't mind necessarily on this list. It's just I spent way too much money, more than what I play out of it.
Okay. Yeah, I did not take that approach, so that's good.
My honorable mention will be the main one.
Okay, I gotcha. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm assuming I'm first. Am I always first in these?
Pretty much, unless you want it any other way. I mean, just tell me.
Okay, cool.
Switch it up.
Cool. Yeah, so my honorable mention is a game that I basically did a complete 180 on liking it. I think whenever we had first played it, Kat and I were doing a series. It was her and I. We were at like 8 and 9s on it. And then, we got further and further into it and started actually hating setting it up and then hating the missions. And then it went down to like a 4. And while this game has such a cool premise, it's the biggest slog to actually play. And so much so that it got so many complaints that the designers basically created a rule set to omit, a major function of the game. And that game is...
Oh, shoot. Sorry.
is this game.
Yeah.
Is Etherfields.
I went next to you.
So Etherfields is, if you're not familiar, it's a game about dreams. You go into various dreams, and it's a really cool concept when you're in the main dreams, but yet they put in this portion of like side dreams that was the same thing over and over and over, and it was so tedious to actually do that by the time you got done with that portion, you were already over the game, and then you still had to do this puzzly main dream thing. It was just exhausting. I don't have specific price points on all of these. I'm sure I could easily find them if I really wanted to, but just go to know that this was over $150 of a game. It's an honorable mention because I got rid of the game before the designers came out with their, revised version of, hey, skip the shitty parts and only do the main missions. And it just wasn't something I even wanted to, try and get back. So yeah, I mean, it's a cool concept. But what was the next picture? I was curious.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna be better at that. That is the picture of
Yeah, so
whatever that big guy is.
So these pictures, actually, funny enough, these the cards that are down here, those are from the shitty portion of the game. I don't remember what they called them, but yeah, you essentially had to do the exact same thing. You had a deck, like a side deck of whatever random events. Like the deck was almost always the same, and some main dreams put more cards in there, but really it was just you were top decking until you finally got done with that portion, and then you're like, oh, now let me pull out all the cards for this cool weird dream that we have to try and go through. But yeah, I mean, production quality is great. They went in the same vein as, I mean, they did Tainted Grail, but Seventh Continent with the cards are like the locations. And all of them had some really cool premises, but yeah, we just didn't want to put in any of the effort. So yeah, that's my number 11, Etherfields.
All right. Well, my number 11 is the one I was talking about just a little bit ago. It's on this list because I own everything for it.
Shadows of Brimstone, I understand.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, I guess I do kind of have a little remorse spending thousands of dollars, but it's such a good game. This was a game that I don't want to get rid of because I enjoy the gameplay, but it's such a slog when you do get it out to play it. I anticipate this possibly being on your list. I'm not sure. And that is Folklore, the Affliction.
Nice. I wasn't sure. Yeah, because you do still own everything for this.
Yes, and I like the game. It's just at this point, I mean, by now you probably realize I'm a completionist. So even though this game doesn't get played a whole lot, like when they keep pumping out these Kickstarters for expansions and crap like that, I just keep buying them and buying them and buying them, and then it just kind of sits there, and because it's such a long, kind of drawn out, tedious, fiddly game, that's why I made it my honorable mention, because I still like it, but I regret kind of jumping in full force. Like if somebody else would have owned it, I wouldn't have bought it. Like I would have played somebody else's instead of buying it. But and this one, it's that horror RPG thing. It's such an interesting thing. Like if they had something with this game, and I think we've talked about this before, like some sort of an app or something that kind of sped things up. Yeah, because it kind of has that weird thing, like almost like a Final Fantasy kind of thing. Like you're roaming this big world map, and then boom, there comes an encounter, and then you zoom in and have to do set up the thing and pull out the mat and set it up. Which is fun once it's there. It's just all that setup and tear down kind of takes you out of the mood.
I envision, we did talk about this, but it's still one of my most requested of this company, which they'll never do. They'd have to completely redo. I mean, I guess they could do I don't know if this is the first edition, but if they did a completely new game, the Fantasy Flight Descent app, where it has the entire map, and you technically, when you click on a main mission to go to, and it's just like you go and you have like a text of something that happens, they could easily do that same concept. And if they still want the skirmishes, then you can have a quick skirmish on the computer, and then maybe you roll dice. You already have the dice out anyway, but you don't have to pull out the stupid map. You can just quickly do a skirmish, and then you get to the main mission and you set all that up.
Yeah, because I mean, they did so many cool things with this, like the ghost. You get, when you die, you become a ghost. You do all that stuff. You have the
day-night cycle.
Yeah, and the skill trees. Like each characters are really unique, and then you can choose at the very beginning which kind of part of the tech tree you want to go down. I guess their skill tree. And certain people can only buy certain things in town. I mean, there's a lot of freedom with it. It's very very fiddly, and that setup and tear down just kind of takes the rhythm out of the game a little bit. So that's why it doesn't hit the table as much as I still do like it.
Yep. Nope. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
That picture. There's what we're talking about. This is one of the scenario maps. So you're going that underneath that map's the world map. And then all of a sudden, boom, you have an encounter. So you have to pull that little grid map out, set it down, set the miniatures up, and then go for it. And that's kind of the draw to it. Or
And then hell, some of the side missions you go on, it's just like, oh, okay, this will be a quick 30-minute thing, and then turns into like another hour and a half, and you're like, I wasn't mentally prepared for this. I'm so upset.
Yeah, it's a very, very long game if you play it that way, for sure.
Yep.
So anyway, that's my
right.
number 11, Folklore.
Good deal. All right, my number 10. This was a game that I actually didn't back on Kickstarter, but I think I bought it from someone at some point. I got the all-in pledge, and it actually has come out with a second edition. From what I hear, it's completely fixed the entire game, that it basically makes the first edition obsolete. I haven't given the second edition a chance. This is also why it's a little bit higher at number 10. But oh man, like, was the concept of this game cool, but it's so boring and repetitive, and that is Massive Darkness.
Is that a second edition, or was it just
I don't know if it's a second edition. It's a redo. It's like Massive Darkness 2, whatever, Light and Hell, or whatever they called it, Lightbringer. Which, so this game totally turned me off of the IP, I guess, if you can even call them IPs. But that I didn't even look at. I was like, I don't care what they're doing, like, because I'm very particular with CMON now on kind of what I back from them. But Massive Darkness was a mob dungeon crawl. Like, that's it. You picked a scenario, you had a hero, and you fought multitudes of enemies. It's like if you were to play like D&D, but your DM for some reason loved swarms, and that's all you fought. And then there's a major boss that you could fight, but not really. It's just kind of over there. And then you're like, well, I'd like to fight that thing. That thing seems pretty cool, like that giant, or that giant over there. Let's go fight that. Nah, you gotta fight bats and wolves and goblins over and over, and then run to an area to potentially get some loot, and the loot's not even cool. This game was just so blah of a game. It had some concept of being in dark areas. There were areas on the board. I don't know if the next picture has it. So they had like those corners and like the light. I'm pointing at I always do this. I'm pointing at the screen like they know which were, but the top
I can
of this,
use my cursor.
There we go, right there. So there were rules, and it's been a long time since I've played this. I just know that, boy, when I bring it up, my friend Devin, who I played it with, he's like, oh my God, that game. But they had rules where if you were in the shadows, you were more susceptible to enemy damage or something like that. And then you wanted to get into the light areas, which made you stronger.
Made them weaker.
Made them weaker. But boy, was it just so nothing. This is like a nothing game. And we went through like three or four missions because there was a campaign. It was really play these 6 scenarios in a row. Not their best. I mean, no one wanted to buy this, especially in bulk, because it's overpriced, because it's classic CMON, just mini dump. And I don't know. Maybe Massive Darkness 2 is better, but I don't care.
I haven't been hearing, people have been getting their pledge, and I haven't been hearing any buzz or anything. So I don't know. I haven't been hearing good, bad, anything. So don't know.
I'm almost curious. So Massive Darkness, it's called Hellscape. It has a 7.2. That's embarrassing. And then Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape, 7.8. So it's a little bit better. What's very interesting about that, it might be like, oh wow, that's better. But here's the thing. One, with new games that come out, especially now, they're usually all like immediately 8s or 9s. Like, but the fact that there's less ratings of this at 360 and it's barely above the first one doesn't bode well for the game. And I don't know. Is it the same designers?
I think it's the exact same everything. They just used, there was that one guy on, I want to say on BGG.
It's not.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No, it's completely different.
I know they used a lot of the aspects of this. This guy made a BGG campaign thing that he had made for the first edition, and they used it
Okay.
in the second as well.
Gotcha.
To kind of make it better.
Yeah, so the designer for this one was Raphael Guiton, Jean-Baptiste Lullian, and Nicolas Raoult. And I mean, I basically was just super racist trying to pronounce those names.
Well, and I think those are the original Zombicide designers too.
Are they? Okay.
I want to say that's I can believe so.
And then for Massive Darkness Hellscape, we got Alex Altenu and Marco Portugal. So yeah. So that's interesting. That's a completely different team.
Yeah.
Just kind of looking at the pictures. Yeah, it's I don't care. I just kind of want to see. Yeah, it looks the same in terms of the tiles. Like,
Yeah.
In fact, it's almost as if this picture that we're looking at is a tile. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if they recycled stuff. They're like, no one bought our Massive Darkness. Let's grab some from storage and combine it.
I was a sucker and bought everything for this game. So
yeah. I will say though, Massive Darkness 2 has a cube tower.
Yeah, I will get a chance to play it because
you will.
Jason, one of the guys over in Joplin, bought the all in for it.
Okay,
so
cool.
Sure, I'll get a chance to try it.
Let me know if it's more of the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my number 10, Massive Darkness.
All right, my number 10 is a game that you and I played. I didn't get it when it was on Kickstarter, but I bought an all-in pledge off of a guy. And it was a game that I like the original premise of this game. So then when they decided to come out with this spin-off version of this game and we played it, it just was kind of shit, and I pretty much, the reason it's 10 instead of all the way down is because all the minis work for the original game. So I gave it that. And that is
okay.
This was one of those games that, I mean, I love Arcadia Quest, and then they're like, oh well, this is a dungeon crawl, another different kind, a cooperative version, because it's pretty much cooperative, and you are going through this. But the problem was they had all these cool miniatures, and then all the bad guys were just dice.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no bad guy miniatures. You rolled dice, and then whatever they rolled was what the power of the bad guy and all that stuff. And then you had these different objectives to play. What saved this a little bit was that they had the conversion pack that lets you use all the heroes from this game in Arcadia Quest, as well as all the heroes from Arcadia Quest could be played in this. Mm-hmm. So they, and like you can see there, those dice are the bad guys, so the miniatures are typical Arcadia Quest miniatures, the chibi fantasy heroes and all that stuff. But then you would have those dice that would pop out and be your enemies that you would have to fight. And when we played it, it was like, it was just, yeah. I mean, I'd rather be playing Arcadia Quest if I'm going to be playing this stuff, and they kind of, I mean, I know the price point was cheaper because they didn't have all the miniatures for the bad guys, but I think it would have done a lot better if they had went the miniature route. But
yeah, I think they must have been trying to differentiate themselves or justify why they made this game, because if they used minis as the enemies, then I mean, they had Massive Darkness, but then if they try to do anything else, then it would have been Arcadia Quest. So they're like, oh, let's use dice, and that's how we can sell it.
Yeah, and when you get the all-in for this, I mean, you had the basic game, with the stuff, but then they had monster dice packs that were extra $25, and other kind of monster deals that were $25. You see, like it was typical CMON where you just kept throwing $25 expansions in, and then
and it adds up real quick.
Yeah, so this is one that it's just garbage. I mean, for all intents and purposes, other than the minis being able to be played in Arcadia Quest, because there were some pretty decent heroes that they had created for this that worked well over there.
Yeah, but, I mean, the thing about dungeon crawls like this one in Massive Darkness is, I mean, it's not like it was complex, like they were streamlined. I just don't get the point of playing a game and you're just going through the motions. You have no creative decision. You have no cool atmospheric events. You have no amazing, turns where you're doing something. This one was just, all right, what enemies are in this room? All right, let's pull from the bag of dice and just who cares what they are. Like they're not even thematic. Like you just see colored dice and you're like, excuse me, this game makes me want to throw up. Oh, you see the witch there has 3 attack and 3 defense. Ooh. Yeah.
Well, and when we played it, we mowed through it. I mean, it wasn't even a challenge. I mean, we just went through it, crushed it, and it wasn't like
exactly.
we were on the easy level and stuff. So it was just, I think it was just one of their things that's like, hey, Arcadia Quest is really hot. Let's throw this out. People will buy it, buy the base game, and then buy the conversion pack. It's just a way to get some money and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was one of those suckers that bought it all in.
And I think the only people who, talk this game up are the ones who also really love Arcadia Quest.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is a perfect list to justify like anyone who has any type of denial. Like if any of you like any of our games, then just accept that you have denial and understand that it's okay. You wasted money.
Yeah.
All right. My number 9 is our first crossover. It is one
really?
Yep. It's you have 2. You have 50-50 chance of
I know it's not Mass Morris. It's probably Folklore.
Yep. My number 9 is Folklore. I think and the other reason, like how I rank these games was obvious. I mean, it wasn't really too difficult as to how badly I felt of spending money on it. Like kind of the disparity between how much I disliked the game and also how much money it was is kind of what I took into consideration. So this one, like we already talked about, just has so many cool things going for it. But the bad outweighs. Oh, I have a different picture.
Yes.
The bad well, for some reason, these people used Marvel Champions.
I noticed that when I popped it up. I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah. But there were so many cool RPG elements of this, and the fact that you had different kinds of classes that you usually don't see. It's just overshadowed by the fact that this came out in 2017. It felt like it came out in 2000.
Well, in the second edition came out more like 20. Oh yeah, maybe, I don't know, because there was a first edition and the second edition came out at like a year and a half, 2 years later.
Okay, well, the one that BGG pulled up was from 2017.
Okay,
which is from 5 years ago, but at the same time, Gloomhaven came out that same year.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a dungeon crawl, I mean, it's such a more. I don't want to say streamlined because Gloomhaven has a lot of little rules, but so does this. But this one just had it tried to do a crafting thing, and you just had a massive deck of shit, and then it's like, oh, I want to put poison on my blade. Well, you didn't find poison. You found an herb, and you need that herb and a mortar and pestle, and also another herb. And it's like, oh, well, can I buy those? No, you have to draw them from the deck. It's just so many good ideas just to turn it into a slog to ever play. And then the combat. We never really talked about the combat, but you felt like you were getting your ass kicked with 0 chance of doing something interesting. It came down to rolling percentiles, which I'm fine. I think the percentile is a unique way. But if you're fighting a wolf and you're this massive madman, and they hit on a 70, a 40% or higher, and you hit them on a 70% or higher, well, guess you're going to be, getting your ass kicked by a wolf. It just wasn't fun. It wasn't exciting. It's like 80%, bad shit that made the game annoying to play, and then 20% really cool stuff. So that's why it's up on my list a little bit higher. I will say I don't own any of these games. Like if I don't like my games, then I don't keep them. And if I have to eat a cost just to get it out of my house, then I eat the cost. But usually I break even.
Yeah, my thing was, maybe it was a game that I spent a lot of money on, but it just was never getting played because of how I play a lot of solo games now.
Mm-hmm.
So the remorse of spending that money. I mean, and that'll be something that'll come up a little later on one of them.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. So that's my number 9, Folklore, the Affliction.
All right. My number 9 is a game that used to be a top 10 game for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I, being the completionist that I am, I I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars on this game, and just recently sold it because it was never getting played, because there is a better version with that.
Oh, I think I know
came
what
out.
it is.
That's Marvel Legendary. I loved this game back. I mean, this game came out in probably 13, 14, something like that.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
And I love deck builders, so I was all about it. But they pumped so much stuff into this game. Like
they're still pumping.
Yeah, they're still pumping stuff. And I quit buying finally when I finally wisened up. But I mean, I had everything for this, and it just sit in like 5 or 6 boxes, completely packed, sleeved, and all this stuff. And I just never played it because Marvel Champions came out, and Marvel Champions is better. I mean, with there's a little more theme to it and more everything. And with this deck building game, it's typical deck building. I mean, you make a hero deck out of 5 heroes, you throw them in, shuffle them up, and then you pick your mastermind and henchman and all that crap, and you work through a scheme. That is one cool thing about this game, is there were so many different schemes. Like, you could play so many different styles of this game. It's just, in my mind, at some point there was a tipping point where it just all started becoming bloat. Like, there's just so much stuff to choose from, and it was like, I'm never going to play all this crap, and I'm just buying it because I want to have it all.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
This one I didn't consider because I necessarily never regretted buying it. I just was never going to get it played. Because Marvel Champions, like we said, is the superior game. And they're the same in theme. I guess one is deck construction and the other is deck building. This one, of course, being the deck builder. But yeah, like, it came down to excessive bloat. Every mini expansion came with some new keyword, and then it's like, oh, well, if I randomly pick this hero, then I have to trudge through 15 rule books to try and find the keyword that it does, and that's just annoying. You never want your deck builder to be like weird to play.
Right. I mean, it was awesome for the early time, but then and the reason I consider this more was because I probably didn't even touch the last 6, 7, 8 expansions. I think the last thing I played was the X-Men, and any of the small expansions that came after that I didn't even touch. I was just buying them because I wanted to have everything, and then it just became a point where I was just like, I just got to stop, because it's not getting played, and there's so many different things.
Yeah, the new one, I mean, I just saw an ad for this one. It's Doctor Strange. Let's see. Oh, it's gonna be impossible for me to find. Doctor Strange in the Shadows of Nightmare. It's like, what is that? Like, what is that even? It's just like, I mean, it's cool with the fact that they're taking you literally have everyone. It's the amount of heroes and villains and masterminds it's amazing. But I mean, it never felt thematic.
Right.
It became a deck builder, and it's like, well, I don't like just plain Jane deck builders. And if I want to feel like I'm in the Marvel universe, I got another game for that. So yeah, I mean, this is a good pick for sure.
Yep.
All right, my number 8 is another CMON game, and I was looking at my list, and I was like, there might be a theme here. This one was one that I also didn't back off of Kickstarter. I ended up getting a copy from a friend years ago, didn't like it at that time. And then years later, I bought it again And I'm like, maybe I'll like it this time. And I still didn't like it. And it's a pain in the ass to store and a pain in the ass to sell for a game that I think is a relatively cool theme, but it boiled down to just another mini, they just shit out minis just to have them. And that is The Others, Seven Sins. So this was obviously back, when they were Cool Mini or Not, with their logo.
Mhm.
So The Others is basically a game where it's a one versus many game. One person plays one of the seven sins, and then the other people play a group of heroes. Like each person does control a hero, but they have a stack of individual classes, and it's basically given that their heroes aren't going to survive. They're going to become corrupted. They're going to die from wounds, and the one player, the sin player, wins whenever they don't have anyone in their reserves. The other people play, I don't remember. It was called Faith. It was an acronym for something else, but I don't remember what that stood for. But it was a dice chucker. Like the sin player just felt extremely overpowered, and that's coming from the person who almost always played the sin player. And I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like you guys are challenging me in any way, just because I'm gonna attack this person over here. And yes, I get all the dice, like all the green dice that are available. Yep, they're mine. I'm gonna roll them all, and yes, I immediately kill you. And they had different scenarios. This is another pick a scenario and play it. And the sins, while looking different, felt like they were playing the same. Yeah, they obviously had their kind of generic feel of being different, but it wasn't anything like dramatic where you're like, oh my god, pride is like this and wrath is like this. It's like, yeah, okay, wrath is kind of wrathful, but he's kind of similar to pride. And then all the different heroes, there were different colors, red, I think red, blue, green, and yellow, and that kind of defined their class of mainly whether if they were support or roguish or the heavy hitters. uh it was also one of those where the player, the one player, the sin player, had a bunch of cards that he could use and to like affect every outcome. So basically he got to do whatever he wanted, and the other players just had to survive. It's it's annoying. This game is such a slog to even play. They never, I mean, Simon never comes with any type of storage solution. Them and Fantasy Flight are like the two that are like, here's a bunch of stuff, figure it out on your own. And every other company has figured it out. It's these two because they can get away with it because people buy their games. Yeah, I never enjoyed playing this game, and I have played on both sides, and it felt hopeless to be on the other side. And I get that's the theme, but it's still not fun when you're losing and you're continuously losing. And then the being the sin player, you just steamroll everything, so it's not even a challenge. Yeah.
So just so you know, the faith stands for Federal Authority for the Interdiction of Transdimensional Horrors.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't retain that. Like it should have just popped right out. With just how much this game stuck with me, that I should have just remembered that stupid. It's like I don't know. And the other thing is like they shot themselves in the foot really with making it about the seven sins, because that was it. They couldn't ever release more content. You had more heroes, but then the one player only had 7 options, and there were like, I felt like 20, 25 heroes to pick from. But this was, I feel like in their early days, like, I don't know. The more I look at Simon, the more I'm like, the good games of theirs are really, really good, like 9s or 10s, but man, do they have a lot of stinkers, I think. So yeah, the others just, I really just don't see anyone talking about this game anymore either.
And their tiles kind of look similar. Like those tiles look like Zombicide. like with the streets and stuff.
Yep.
It's
Yep. It's
like,
almost kind of like a copy and paste is what I'm starting to
yeah,
realize as I look further at a lot of their games. And it really was like that. Like you had mobs of different types of enemies. You had the big bad, the seven deadly, and then he would have like specialized characters. And like in this one, it's corrupted nuns, and they had a special effect. And then you just had regular enemies just kind of running around. It's just, and then the green thing off to the right, that's like the objective board. That's what the faith players had to, like, they had to meet. And but they were all relatively the same. It's like, okay, you have to do this one part, and then you have a choice. You can do this one or this one, but then it all boils down to basically kill the sin player. It's stupid. It's stupid. This game is such a waste of time and space and money. So this one really should have been higher because I bought it twice and I didn't like it either. But here it is. It's at number 8.
All right. My number 8 is a game that I was really, really jazzed about when the Kickstarter came out because of the pedigree of their other games prior to its release. And then I got it and I kept hearing people talking about it and there wasn't a lot of good buzz. So then mine just stayed and shrink. And I got to play somebody else's once. It didn't enthuse me. So I ended up selling it again. So it's on this list mainly because, I spent all this money on it and never even opened it before I sold it, because it wasn't really a game for me at that point. And that was Ultra Quest.
Okay. All right.
I love Street Masters. Brook City's awesome, and with the modular deck system that they use and all that stuff. But it wasn't enough to make me like this game because, if I'm going to play a fantasy dungeon crawl game, there's a lot of other ones I would prefer to play. And like I also said, it was just one of those things. I bought it mainly because I didn't even really look at this campaign much. Like
same.
I saw Blacklist Games, modular deck system, Sadler Brothers. Yes, I'm in.
High fantasy, hell yeah.
Right. And then I was just like, it just didn't really catch me. If I'm going to play a game like with this deal, I'm going to play Street Masters just because of it seems to fit that. That modular deck system seems to fit that better. And I didn't play this a ton. Like I said, I played it one time, somebody else's, and sold mine because it wasn't something I thought I was going to keep. So
yeah,
it's kind of a loose deal like that. It's a regret just because like I said, I bought it all and just never was excited enough to get it out of shrink even, and everything. So
yeah.
I know you.
Yeah,
still have the stuff. So
I do still have it, and it's weird because this was considered like for my list. It didn't make my list, because one of the biggest things I think for the run through that we messed up on. And first of all, the rule book for this is basically the Sadler brothers wipe their ass with pieces of paper, and then that was the rule book. It's horrendously bad, and that's kind of, it feels like the overall theme of this game is they half-assed it, because the expansions for it are very weird. Like, it's like, okay, here's a campaign, but it doesn't feel cohesive with anything else. They went a hero quest kind of route with that board, which there's nothing wrong with that part. I guess if being it just colors and rooms, they tried to open it up to a lot of different. It just feels like they didn't have an idea, or they didn't want to do a reskin. Like this one could have easily just been, take the same idea and just do individual boards like they do with Street Masters, but they were probably trying something different. But so the rule that we missed when I first played this was when you open a door, I thought you just summoned one thing. Like you draw one card. So I thought it was super slow. Like, oh my God, really? There's one enemy for however many players. But a lot of people corrected me on the video saying, no, when you open a new location, you draw a card for every player. So that can bring out, new, 2 enemies or a trap and an enemy. And it does speed up the game a little bit more. At least you're invested the entire time. My biggest like complaint with this that I almost always just completely ignore is that lurker deck. The lurker deck is the modular deck system, which is in every of their other games, is basically the map you're playing on, the quest, and the enemy. And then of course who you play, but I don't think that's really considered. And you do that here. You pick like the quest and you pick the enemy, and then that might be it. I can't but
Yeah, I can't
so
remember.
you have your enemy of whatever frogs. There's like frogkin, and they have different levels, enemy types and traps and stuff. But there's a lurker deck where if it tells you to draw that, then it could be like, oh, all of a sudden the pig people are here. Oh, it's the villain, the main villain. That's the third deck you pick.
Right.
But the lurker deck, it's so immersion breaking. It's like, why are all of a sudden we're fighting this type? I picked this deck specifically to fight against, and now I have to dig through my fucking box to find gargoyles or what. I hate it. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in games is when I have it set up and now I have to dig back in the box for shit. I hate that rule so much. But anyway, I'm sorry, this is not on my list.
No, that's fine. You're saying exactly. I mean, you have more experience with this game than I do. I just kind of,
yeah,
but
yeah. But the reason why it's not on my list is because the card play is still there. You have a lot of freedom with what you do on your turns. You can make it thematic. Like Kat and I, when we played, we picked the 2 halflings, and we did like some mission where we were like captive and we had to escape. And whenever you're playing just that part, and you're playing it, correctly, it can be a lot of fun. You can do a lot of really cool things with characters. Hell, there's like a Witcher horse character to play. So I'm still keeping it. It's my least favorite of their games between Brook City and Street Masters, but yeah, it's still fun to play for me.
Yep. I would agree.
All right, my number 7 was one that was so hyped up. Like if we were to talk about IP games, this is one that I was like, I'd be like, man, this game should be amazing. And a version of it is, but it is not this version. This one is, grind and have a bad time in the game until you maybe get to a boss, and then you might have a fun time. And that is Dark Souls, the board game. Steam Forged. This is a company I just stay away from at this point. They somehow get a hold of these IPs, and they do 50% of it as really good, and the other 50 is really bad. Actually, I wouldn't even say 50% is really good. It's good, but then the other 50 is really bad. And so this one, it's kind of a combination of all the Dark Souls. I believe this cover is actually Dark Souls 3. But you essentially, I mean, it's best solo. Like if you play this, even like with 2, you're not having that good of a time. My run through years ago was solo, and I even highlighted just the boss fights because that's their best part. So you have to actually meticulously grind and redo different boards and then reset it up, so it's tedious as a board game mechanic. Hell, a lot of people don't even like it in the video game, but at least you go to a bonfire and it like quickly resets, and then you fight the enemies again. In this, it's like, oh, time to rest at the bonfire. Oh, that was one of our limited rests that we have for whatever stupid reason. Let's go and fight, and we have to set it all up again, and then you have to share souls to be able, like if you're playing with multiple people, you have to share the souls to, it is not a fun experience. The boss fights are pretty decent. Like they have like a directional thing, like their base is like circular, and then the top, and you have a top, back, left, right. Each boss had their own deck. And then as you fought them, the deck, whenever you ran out of cards, you flipped it. So you learned patterns. You're like, oh, I know the first card of this is going to be their tail swipe attack. So I know that they're going to be weak here, so I'm going to maneuver. And I like that aspect of the fact that you have to maneuver around the board to fight it. That's something that is sorely missing in the card game. Like the card game, it just kind of sits there. Hell, I would even say in Bloodborne, you don't move. It's a card battle between you and the boss, and you very, very rarely move. At least the boss fights in this one, you do move around to fight, and it is kind of strategic. However, this is an expensive game. It's even more expensive to even get all of it now because people have just jacked up the price. But man, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about buying this game for its minis. Because man, the minis were really good. So yeah,
I'll just stick with the card game.
yeah. Oh, I just played the card game like a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, yep, this is I hate its storage. It has 0 storage. The tiniest box, trying to fit 2.
My own. Yeah,
you're making your own.
I created my own.
Oh, nice.
The thing, yeah. But no, it's an expensive card game too, but it's worth it. Like, I mean, it's expensive for what you get, but it's definitely a good game.
Yeah. Which the card game is made by Steamforged, so they did a good job there. But yeah, this one I constantly see sold, and no one's playing it. Like, it's like I'll just go play the video game at that point. So yeah, that's my number 7, Dark Souls, the board game.
I'm sure you're going to see a Steamforged game for me on this list later too.
Ooh,
so we'll see.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So my number 7 is a game that, being the solo guy, this game was made, in retrospect, it should have been made for a player like me. And I like the game for all intents and purposes, but when a sandbox game, to me, you can do whatever you want, but this one is almost too free. Like, you literally have no direction on where you're going. You're just kind of guessing, and you're playing, and you're just kind of moseying around. And that is the Seventh Continent. And it made this list because when I did it, I got, the base box, the expansion, all that jazz. That's how it hit that money amount that we were talking about. But like I played this, a few sessions of this, and and it was fine. It was just, but I was just sitting there, and I wasn't really felt like I was accomplishing a whole lot. It just kind of moving here, moving there. This is one of those games you almost need to have like this huge table, and then just have it set up, and maybe play a few cards, do a few areas, and then leave it, and then come back to it whenever you have time and stuff. To sit down and play a session of this, I mean, you could go on. There's so many damn map cards with this game that you could build forever, just and constantly doing stuff. And it just wasn't something that ended up amazingly ended up not really appealing to me, even though it's pretty much a solo game. I think I'm probably going to get sucked into getting the Seventh Citadel, just because it seems like it might have a little bit more theme or direction, maybe.
From what I understand, it's a sandbox adventure game, so you have quests specifically telling you where to go, and maybe you have to figure it out not on your own, but like, it's not going to be like, go to card 11 or whatever. Right. It's still going to be this general concept, but it should be more focused.
Yeah, and like that's what it was with this one. You plop on the island, and then it's like, I think I'll go left, and then you go there, and it's like, maybe I'll go up. And other games have taken that system and have built upon it and done stuff like Tainted Grail and stuff like that. And I think you said Aetherfields did something similar, right?
Yeah, it had the tiles that were connected, really.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I mean, other things have used this. I think it just needed, it was too open world for me, if that makes sense. I need a little bit of direction,
like at least the occasional like handhold, but like don't tell me to, I'm trying to find, there was someone who commented and they mentioned uh this game in particular. I'm trying to find that comment specifically, because he put it into really good words. That, I mean, that I agreed with him. I just let's see. Might take me a little bit. I did agree with him in what he was saying, but it doesn't bother me, but I can see why it would bother a lot of people.
Yeah, and
Okay, right here.
You got it.
Yep. So Andre Tannhauser said, it's not the really sandboxy open world of the seventh continent which bothers me. It's just a wrong design on the one hand, grant an open world, while on the other hand, it's almost a must to explore every tile and every detail, because else you might arrive at the final spot, but you're missing one or more clues. This might be okay if there was a hint system which helps you where approximately you need to go back to find it, but as it is, the game doesn't support that in almost every fucking curse. I need to check long spoiler posts on BGG to find out what's missing. The one curse where I found out I actually would need to go back on hunting for hours to have enough food to sacrifice to an altar, I got so bored and frustrated that I actually stopped going on. Another really bad design is that on the one hand, you sometimes want to get the map refreshed to have fresh food, but on the other hand, it's an organizational mess to go back a long way to a location to have already been to find a missing clue. In the end, the satisfaction rewards for spending like 15, 20 hours on a curse is not really worth it. So I'm really split by, on one hand, giving the game a great 8.25 for its adventure survival theme and the mechanisms of hand management, but after 2 curses, I'm really missing the motivation to give it another go.
Yep.
And I was like, I have nothing to debunk. You are absolutely not wrong. This is for those very specific people, slightly myself, but a friend of mine who I only play this game with love the grind. They sink their teeth into video games that they're like, I want to explore every little detail, and they get satisfaction out of that. I'm not quite there, because at least I value my time a little bit more, but yeah, so I still love this game. It is very, I mean, it was in my top, 20.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you play this with a very specific group, if not yourself.
Yeah, and well, and it's weird because in video games, that's how I play. I love nitpicking and searching out every single little thing. It's just I don't know why it doesn't work with this as much,
The reason why is because in video games you click a button to
be.
And this you don't. You have to search. You have to meticulously do that. So if you were to really just like, if you had someone there with a timer and hit start, stop every time that you did something away from the game, I bet you the amount of time you spend fiddling with one curse is hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's not actually playing the game.
Right. Yep.
So
anyway, that's my number 7, coincidentally, 7th continent.
It's the same thing as what I was saying with Dark Souls. I mean, yeah, you click a button to rest at a bonfire and then it all resets, and that's not that big of a deal. But when you're doing the board game version, you have to now pull all the minis you put aside, set them up, reflip the tokens. It's just, I just don't want to do any of that.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of games where we could probably make a top 10 of, fiddly, mind-numbingly, games like that. But without further ado, let's go to my number 6. My number 6 is the other Steamforged game that has such a good IP, but they once again missed the mark, similar to what they did with Dark Souls. But for me, this game didn't have any redeeming qualities. At least Dark Souls, I could be like, well, the boss fights are fun. The boss fights were not fun in any way. This game was so boring, and it has proven to me, making this list, that I would rather play a bad game over a mind-numbingly boring game. And my number 6 is Horizon Zero Dawn.
This must be the
Okay.
one because Emily was saying she could not find a good box picture of this.
Yeah, I feel like it is very difficult. Watch, I'm gonna pull it up and it's gonna be right there. Horizon Zero
Everything was, as
Dawn.
she said, everything was at an angle and stuff.
That might be because even the people who make these pictures didn't bother. Yeah, if I'm not, I think that was the case. I think I had to do some weird thumbnail. Oh, hey, I found one. Well, tell your daughter she sucks. But anyway, no, yeah, this game is so boring. Now, to be fair, I have only played the base game, but I still stand by that expansions, like, I just refuse. If I do not like the base game, I don't want to spend any more money, even though I did, because I went the all in on this. I don't want to spend any more money on expansions in the hopes that I like it better. But yeah, so this one, they did some weird thing. If you're playing competitively, like with other players, of where you're doing the trials in the video game, there are these trials that you can do to, I don't even remember. It's been a long time since I've played the first one. But there were trials that are just kind of in the game for you to get better equipment. But this one was kind of like, yeah, we're competing, but it's semi-cooperative where we have to fight these enemies together, but whoever gets the final kill gets the equipment or gets the loot, and then they can spend that on better items. And you did similar things where you had armor, you can get slings, you could get traps, and you can do all that. On this map, they have paths like that the enemies kind of walk on if you don't aggro them. But the problem is almost every spot you go to aggroes them. It's just like, I'm going to move diagonal. Oh, well, now I'm in his line of sight and he's just going to run towards me. It's like there was never really any tactile movement on these boards. Besides the actual minis, if they were painted, like the board, like the landscapes are hideous. Like in the base game, once again, it's basically these just brown tiles. And then you might be thinking, oh, okay, well, you have to grind to level up to get better gear to then do the final boss. And this, you pick a final boss like you did in Dark Souls. So maybe the boss fight will be exciting, similar to Dark Souls. No, because in the base game, you get one boss, and it's not even, I was gonna say it's the Thunderjaw. That's not what it is. It's what the hell is that? The Sabertooth. And even in the video game, the Sabertooth is like your tutorial boss. Like it's not, it becomes a regular enemy shortly after. Like the only reason I would want to play this game is to try the expansions, like the actual Thunderjaw, that big Stegosaurus type of enemy, or the alligators, or the, I don't remember what the bird was called, the storm bird, or the whatever those giant rock things, the rock breakers. Yeah, like those bosses are the ones that you want to fight, but those were expansions, and I sold this game before even getting those, because I just didn't want to bother. Like, yeah, those bosses might be pretty cool and exciting to fight, but man, was the gameplay just not worth that wait, because I got the base game before everything else. It's not like I got it all at once, so I didn't even have the luxury of getting the chance to try it with the better bosses. So once again, comparing, funny enough, the two Steamforged games back to back, at the very least you could flub some numbers. You could, pick out, you could pick your character in Dark Souls and just be like, I'm gonna pick these stats, I want to do this item and a few of these or a few of these items and this weapon, and now I'm gonna go fight the boss. You could kind of do that. This one you really couldn't, and it's just not worth the effort. So
Right.
it's my number 6, Horizon Zero Dawn.
All right.
IPs are hard, man. Like, I know we've talked about doing a top 10 IP. I'm almost 100% certain I cannot, because if there's an IP for a board game, it's probably inferior to Like if it's a video game, if it's a video game IP, that's
Yeah.
gonna be harder.
I could probably do a top 5 pretty.
Yeah.
Pretty
5 I
easily.
definitely could do but it's most likely going to be movies. Because man, it's like, oh, like the Dead by Daylight that level 99 is doing. It's like, one, I have no affiliation to the video game. I've never played it, but it's like, why wouldn't I just play that? I really don't feel like setting this entire game up just to easily play the video game. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've only about maybe 10% into playing the original of this video game. So
Yeah, it's such a good game. Like the actual video game, it's so good. And then they came out with the sequel, which is overshadowed by Elden Ring.
All right. So my number 6 is a game that I've owned twice. And combined in both times, I've probably spent close to $1,000 on content for this game.
Ew.
And I ended up selling it. And it's not because I hate the game. The game is fine. The IP for it is one of my favorite IPs. It's just I can't find a second person to really play it with to have that enjoyment. And then when you and I played it, it didn't ring super well for me at that point. And it's kind of one of those things that it's a game that I like. Well, I'm just gonna do it. It's X-Wing.
There we go.
And the painted minis are, and this was one of those first games, when Fantasy Flight came out, and this is still one of their better sellers, is the X-Wing and their Armada stuff. But the pre-painted minis are awesome. The gameplay is fun. I've played it competitively. It's a fun thing. I went through and I had several $100s worth of minis, because I started collecting when it first came out. And then I sold all that because I never was getting played and there was no competitive scene around here anymore. And then I kind of got this bug up my butt. I was like, you know what? Some guy was selling this collection. I was like, I'll buy that and then buy a bunch of other expansions and stuff too, and just rebuy everything and the second edition stuff. And I probably spent about $500 or $600 buying models for that and everything. And then it just kind of sat around. You and I played it, and then it just kind of sat around. So I sold it.
I whooped your ass. So I mean,
Yes,
I understand why you'd want to sell it after that. I'm kidding.
I mean, I almost kept it just to keep models, like, and on stands and stuff. But I actually have, every time I've owned all this, I've actually profited on reselling it. So, but it's on this list.
This is a good one.
Yeah, because there's so much money in this.
Yeah, I didn't think of this one, and I never got the second edition stuff. I was out of the game by then, but yeah, this would have been a good one. I wonder if it's because I don't have an excuse. It's like I want to say I like this game, but I know our discussion, I didn't rave about it. I think if they made it easier to build your ship list, like there used to be a website or something where you could just it would randomly do it for you, that could be fun. But this is definitely a lifestyle game. This is one that kind of like your Netrunner, that you have everything for it, and your time is spent building, getting into the meta, trying different builds, and going to tournaments. And that is not for me. Tournament lifestyle is I get too salty. Like unless I mentally prepare myself, or it's like a fun bullshit game like Smash Up. Like I would do a Smash Up tournament and be fine. I have done multiple, and I'm like, I've won one and then lost the other, and it's like, and it's whatever, because you can't really take it too seriously. I would probably do a dice throwing tournament. Maybe not. That one might be a little bit too random for me to. It's like, oh man, another ultimate! How fun for you! But no, this one, there was a guy I was playing with back when I lived, like in Joplin, where it was like he was into the tournament scene, and he would always want to play with me and bounce his builds off me, and would just wreck. And I'm like, dude, like I didn't build this, like I just threw this together. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those, like if I had another person that was really into this and wanted to play it a lot, then I would have kept it and it wouldn't be on this list. But
Yeah,
it's just spending so much money that I've spent on it twice.
Yeah.
Not ever hardly getting played. It's like of all that second edition stuff I bought that second time, $600 or whatever, the one I played it with you once.
Yeah.
That's it. And then I sold it for $600.
Didn't we play it twice? I think
Whatever.
we played it twice. I know.
It was that time that you and I played. It was
yeah.
So that's why
this is a good one. Yeah, this is a good one. Definitely see it. All right. You know what's also interesting about this top 10 is the fact that we will have very, very little crossover, because games that like this one, for example, or maybe another one that I've mentioned that you have played, technically, like it could be you never bought it, so it's not your buyer's remorse. You could be like, oh, I agree with you, that game sucks, but but I didn't pay for it, so it's not my problem. So because the reason that reminded me is my number 5. My number 5 is a game that both you and I have played together and very much didn't like. I gave it another shot after our initial run through because of the visceral reaction of fucking man children. But and I was like, you know what? Fine. Okay, so many of you are coming at me. Let me try with different player counts. Okay, it's better at 2. It's still not a good game. And my number 5 is it's Star Wars X-Wing.
No, I forgot to switch it over to that. All right, here we go. Yeah, I know.
My number 5 is Ankh, the Gods of Egypt. Another CMON game. How weird. No, this one, unlike the others, sorry, not like the actual game, the other games. This one had a higher expectation. Like I was very excited for this one because of course Rising Sun and Blood Rage, and luckily those 2 games are not buyer's remorse, and this one was. God, I mean, just go at this point. I'm tired of talking about this game. Its minis are, phenomenal, like top of the line minis. Its gameplay at 2 is fine. It's better. And everyone who says this game is amazing, all of them have that caveat as they play it only at 2, because it dramatically removes the worst gimmick I've seen in any game ever. And it's like, I
haven't been that angry in a game. Those few plays we played that day, man, I was so pissed.
It like ruined that day because we wasted so much time on that. And we played it at 3, which is the worst way to play this game. 4, at least, it's just that merge mechanic is so dumb. It's awful. So whenever you remove that as a 2-player game, you do have a kind of chess-like feel of battling for area control. It's fine. I didn't like this. So it was a combination of the fact that I had really high expectations, the gameplay ended up being lackluster at best. With I mean, yeah, you could have some kind of cool maneuvering of placing your god in area using its special ability, but it was very, very boring. Your god's abilities, I felt like, were super lame, and then your I guess tech tree, for lack of a better term, was very limited. Like it never felt like you were like building up your own kind of god, like at least in Blood Rage you're building. Go ahead.
It was deterministic too. Like, I mean, there was an obvious one to take first,
right?
Like you take the one that gives you extra followers whenever you do stuff. Yeah, that's the first thing everybody's gonna take.
Exactly.
It wasn't like they were different. Like if every god would have had different things,
that
would have been something too.
Where it's like if I'm playing Osiris and then his 4 options, as you progress up that, were radically different from Ra. Oh man, I probably would have kept it. Like just that sheer variety of gameplay would have been amazing. But everyone had the same cards, so you felt like you were the same person. fighting the same person, just maybe a slight tweak in different player powers, but they're not radical in any way. It's just this game felt like it was Eric Lang already out the door for Simon, and he's like, I don't give a fuck, just whatever, make it Egyptian theme, and anyway, give me my check. Which is something I'm very much finding with these 4 that we've put on my list. I don't know if you have any other Simon, but
I have. I don't want to really give it away. I have 3 more Simon in my top 5.
So it's just now it's like, oh my god, does Simon make good games, or do they really just phone it in? And I don't want to say they phoned it in for this game, but man, is it such a step down compared to Rising Sun and Blood Rage. Like, people who are praising this and saying it's the best of the 2 only have one friend. And so they can only play this game with that person, because I'll give it to you, this is the best of the trilogy at 2. Like, I'll give you that. But yeah, no, I don't like this. So this is my number 5, Ankh.
This would have been very high on my list if I had actually wasted the money on it. But
yep, and I did. Luckily, and I sold it. I sold it for how much I paid for it. It's like, man, I actually could have made more money.
Probably.
But I don't care. I just want to get bad games out of my house. I don't care if I have to take a hit in shipping or break even.
Yeah. All right. So my number 5 is a game that I picked up an all-in pledge for this because there was a Kickstarter for like the expansion or extra stuff that was coming out for it, and it looked really cool. It was one of those games that had all the really, really neat dragon miniatures that were really large and had the plastic terrain. It kind of caught me because it had a cooperative aspect to it. And it looked really neat, but then in retrospect, they tried to do too much, I think, in the game, and that's
interesting.
This was
you were like plastic terrain and dragons. I'm like, some deluxe Defenders of the Realm. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, this one had like this huge dragon miniature that was like, maybe 7, 8 inches.
I didn't know you had. Yeah, I didn't know you had played this yet, because I forgot I wanted to try this.
I tried it. Well, and one of the things that happened, and we've talked about this in other games before, they have multiple ways to play the game, and I think when they do that, it kind of takes away from the whole, because this is a competitive game. I think that's how it was initially made, was a competitive game, and then they threw on this team competitive game, so you can play 2 against 2, 3 against 3, 4 against 4. And then they came out with the cooperative campaign, which is why I bought it. And where it wasn't a horrible experience, it seemed like the part that I bought the game for, the cooperative, was kind of tacked on. Now they had the second big Kickstarter, the Teneris Adventures, I think is what it was called. That one, I from what I understand, does more. It was more made cooperative with first in mind, so maybe I would like that one better. But the thing that was all the plastic in this game, like if you see this picture, like one of the boxes, the entire bottom part of that box was just stone walls, like, and they're big boxes, and so it's like all these. And they're solid walls. It's not just like hollow plastic. They're all solid. So I mean, there was like a lot of plastic with this game.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that kind of caught me. I was like, oh, this looks pretty badass, with the terrain and all that stuff. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, I was like, this is kind of like Hero Quest. I mean, only more but then when you buy a game like this, and that's partially my fault, because I was only ever going to play this game co-op/solo, and when that's probably about 25% of the game, and then there's 75% of it that you're not going to use, then that just kind of takes away from it.
For sure.
And the art was really neat, everything like that, but it was just one of those things. I mean, I ended up selling it. I got back what I paid for it, you know, but it was just one of those. Some guy was selling it. It was one of the reviewers from
It was Jeremy, right?
Jeremy Howard, yeah.
Jeremy Howard, yeah.
He's who I bought it from and everything, and yeah, I mean, there isn't much more. I mean, it's your typical. I think, like I said, they wanted it to be an arena combat game, you know, like kind of like Mage Wars and stuff like that. But there's all this, you know, all these 3D terrain and minis and all this jazz, and it just kind of was convoluted a little bit. They tried to throw too much into the box. The Teneris Adventures, I think if it's more focused on the solo cooperative, then I could see myself picking that up, because I love the miniatures and the art and all that stuff. It's just that it just wasn't enough for me to keep this game.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I remember seeing it on Kickstarter, and I was like, oh, this could be neat, but skirmish kind of games, I'm very picky on. And the fact that it's like, oh, it's solo, it's co-op, it's competitive, it's semi-co-op, it's campaign. It's like, nope, okay, nope, you have no idea what you're making here.
We ran into ranked high. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was like, but it is ranked relatively high on. I was surprised actually by how high it was at an 8.8.
I think there's a lot of people that were like how you started off the video. There are a lot of people that paid all that money for this, and it looks cool, and it's their shiny toy, so they're not gonna shit on it.
Or they're playing it competitively, and that's where it shines.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the other game that we've played that did this similar thing, it's a lot lighter than this game, and I enjoy it a lot better, was Ascension Tactics. You know, it had all those different ways to play, and when a game does that, it kind of takes away from the total experience.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep, that's my number 5.
My number 4 is from a company that is kind of strange. They are like named, and people would know the company name, but yet I don't know. In my opinion, they've made one really, really good game, and then a bunch of other duds. And this was one of them. And I've given this game a shot actually twice as well, playing it. And the first time I played it, I was like, absolutely not. This is such a fluff of rules, and it's all over the place with what it's wanting to be. And then I tried it again. I was like, no, I'll try it solo. And once again, just fell super flat in just almost every aspect. And that is Brad.
Sorry. It wasn't going. I hit the button and it wasn't going.
Oh, that is Sine Tempore. At least that's how I pronounce it.
Yeah.
So
that sounds right.
So this is Ludus Magnus. The other game that they made that I love and absolutely love playing is Black Rose Wars. But this one was kind of your, like, I guess it's another dungeon crawl. But it's sci-fi, and your actions were based around a rondel in what you were going to do and also what the enemies were going to do. And you were trying to like control it had a map, and you kind of had decisions. Each map was, or each objective was a certain difficulty ranking that you had to complete, and then you could theoretically go. It was like supposed to be a split campaign, and it was like, oh, remember your choices. And the same idea that Descent second edition remembered your choices. Like you had some option of, oh, if you do mission 4, you get to skip mission 5 and go to 6. Ooh, such innovative gameplay. But yeah, they had 3D terrain, but not really. It was just more obstacles you couldn't interact with in any way. You could technically climb on crates like that. But yeah, you had different types of minions or enemies to fight, but they were kind of reskinned. It was like, instead of a goblin, you had a goblin grenadier, I think is how it's pronounced. And they did kind of have an AI system on how they worked, but it never felt fleshed out. And I understand that that's hard to do, like make a good AI system. but this was really not it. And then they also tried going with unique dice, but you needed to roll very specific symbols to either wound or then have those symbols to spend for your actions or for your cards. And all the while, what you're spending, it was kind of like a stamina system where you do certain aspects and then you move around. On the top left is the rondel. That was such a pain in the ass to ever deal with. And so not only was it a convoluted game of a massive rule book, like you had very generic like storytelling. The characters were kind of cool. You had some kind of tech tree whenever you leveled up, but it was also very slow. It wasn't rewarding when you were leveling up. The one thing I can give this game is that one of their stretch goals, you can play as the 4 people from Spaceballs.
Oh, really?
But yeah, so they had was it Burp or Barf,
Barf.
Star, whatever, the Han Solo
Gosh.
guy. I've
Yeah.
seen the movie like once.
Like Dark Star or something Star.
Yeah. Then you had the Goldie and then the Leia girl. You could technically play as them. I thought that was kind of fun. But they had so many expansions for this as well, like of other worlds you can go to. But man, did I just not ever want to try like any of that. This was a slog to play, and I played it solo, and I'm like, I never want to do this again. So it's not great. Like, it doesn't give me that visceral reaction that like Ankh gave me, but I think objectively speaking, this is a worse game than Ankh. So, and it's around the same price point. So it's like, you could honestly, maybe if I was slightly tipsy, convince me to play a 2-player game of Ankh. I wouldn't want to sit down for this. There's no way. So that's my number 4, Sine Tempore.
All right, so my number 4 is the Steam Forged game I was talking about.
Okay.
And this was one that I bought an all-in Kickstarter from a guy because I love the IP. And it was just kind of a shit show. And that is
okay.
Resident Evil 2, the board game.
I forgot that they made this.
Yeah, they made Resident Evil 2 and 3, but 3 is much better than 2.
Okay.
Resident Evil 2, I mean, the video game is outstanding,
Have you played the remake?
I have not yet.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
But this game, I bought it because of the Resident Evil. I mean, if it has Resident Evil on it, I'm going to buy it. I mean, I own every single card for the Resident Evil deck building game, and it's not a great game, but damn it, I own it all, and it is fun to play. It's because it's a lot better than this. But this game, like everything, the quality of their components are just garbage. Like the punch boards, like there was things that were supposed to be walls that were so thin, like that people were throwing them away because they didn't even think they were supposed to be punched, because like they didn't even and I don't know if the picture is going to show it or not. I don't think it
I mean, that umbrella looks like it's cut out paper.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's
like,
there is it's very, very, very thin stuff. I don't like look at like that card of Leon, like I don't care for the graphic design on the cards. I don't care for that stuff. I mean, the gameplay itself is ultra repetitive. Like you're just constantly doing the same stuff. Once you've done like the first 2 scenarios, you've seen all you've seen everything.
Gotcha.
And everything. There's nothing new. I mean, you're going through and you're doing this stuff, and there's some expansions that came with it, that added like the big alligator, like and all that different stuff. But it just was not, I would rather play that half-assed deck building game that I have, just because the art fits the video game. It's the video game art, it's got all this different
Is
stuff
this not
to
the
it.
video game art?
I mean, it is, but the cards show it more. Like the
I see.
tiles are just so blah,
Yeah.
and then the walls that they had were these little weird strips of black was all it was.
Okay.
And like I said, there was a lot of people that were tossing because they were so thin that people weren't punching them. Like they were punching out stuff, the tiles, and then they wouldn't see those and they were just tossing them away, and it just wasn't great at all. I'm glad that when they made Resident Evil 3 that they remedied a bunch of the issues from this one. I'm not saying
Okay.
Resident Evil 3 is a great game by any means, but it's much better than Resident Evil 2.
Which is a shame because I think Resident Evil 2 is a better video game.
No, I agree.
Like, I like 2 over 3.
And I hope that they even improve on 3 and come out with my favorite Resident Evil 4 in board game and do it right, because that would be awesome. If they're maybe learning as they go and then maybe put out 4, I'll be like, yes, I'm in on it. But yeah, and there wasn't that great of the monster, there wasn't that many monsters type stuff. The battles didn't seem that great. It was just it seemed very dated. Very dated.
all the boss fights in these games are a lot more cinematic. Like in this one, the crocodile, you don't really fight, you just run from it.
Right.
So it'd be for me, it'd be kind of boring.
Yeah,
I haven't played this. I stayed away from it because I'm not super into Resident Evil. I've played them and they're fun. Like I haven't played any of the newer ones because I definitely don't care. But yeah, Resident Evil 2 and 4 and 3 are pretty good.
Yeah. So avoid this one at all costs.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
All right. My number 3 is another one that was just so boring. And we tried to throw in the expansions whenever we did the run through. And, to be fair, that it does say on the, hey, don't combine all of these. And I was like, well, we're gonna, to try and get something out of this game. And there's nothing worse than a deterministic game where you could also have randomness thrown into one player's favor. And this one had a cool concept of a post-apocalyptic winter war game, but it's worse than every other game that is similar to it. And that is Steam Watchers. So, and it sucks because Mythic Games is very much well known for having horrible rule books and erratas, and but once you trudge through all that, they typically have great games. This is the one game that I felt their rule book was actually good, but their game sucked. So this one is, you play as different warring factions. These are, you have your, a lot of them are kind of generic. You have your, radiation people, you have your regular humans. The ones on the right in the yellow, they're the ones that look the coolest, but they're yellow, so I hate them. I never played them. They had a few expansions that added in new factions, and then another one that added in like a train, like a fuel train, because it would allow you to move faster, therefore getting into combat more to try and claim the steam. So the theme of this game is that, post-apocalyptics, whatever caused it is now the land is covered in ice. And this is a great picture. And you have these steam columns that erupt from the ground. It's a pretty cool concept. And the steam melts the ice, and therefore you can farm, and that's how people are living. But as you're warring for this land, but you have every game you pick where you start. There's a deck of cards that you draft, and that's your starting location. But at the top left, there's a deck of steam columns, and a particular role that you can bid for, that you can get, is to draw from that deck and pick where the steam columns are showing up. But these are random, so you can basically almost always guarantee that you're going to pick, they're going to go near you or in an area they are at. And these are victory points. So it's so mind-numbingly dull. You have very little decisions, and whenever you do have a decision, it's either do I want to attack this person or this person. I'll attack this person, and the combat is so it's like it wanted it to be Scythe without having any of the getting into the player's head of Scythe. Like at least with Scythe, whenever you're combating, you're like, okay, they can only do a maximum of 7 combat points, but they have a bunch of cards. Do they have a 5? Like, can they beat me out in this? Well, I have more people here. Do they value like their power more than I think they do. Like there's that kind of head game. This doesn't have any of that. When you go into combat, you can be like, aha, your strength is 5, -7. There's literally nothing you can do to actually beat me in this, so I'm gonna win this fight. So, and then you don't even really kill anyone, you just kind of push them away, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that was that. It had the same type of action selection as Game of Thrones does, or Battle for Rokugan, where you put tokens in and you all reveal. It's just so boring. And then the fact that it's long, it's boring. Yeah, some of the factions are kind of different, at least they have a unique unit. But you do the same thing over and over and over. You have scenarios that might change it. We tried adding expansions that give you a totally different unit, and then also giving you a train that allowed you to kind of module, like it had 3 sections and you could like pick tech tiles. That was kind of neat. And that let you move across the land a lot quicker. But oh my God, was it just awful. Like and this is where I once again state that I'd rather play a bad game, like a really bad game, because at least I get some emotion out of that versus just, I'm gonna move here. I won combat. I got 5 points, I win. You know, it's just, such a slog. So, and then because with boring games, you can easily compare them to other types. Oh, this is worse than it's like they wanted to be Scythe. It's worse than that in every way. It's like I'd rather, play any other combat game, like Dudes on the Map game, than this one. So yeah, so not a great one. That's my number 3, Steam Watchers.
All right. Well, here comes the CMON train. This next 3 are going to be
your
CMON.
next 3.
So, yep. This one is one that is a standalone expansion for a game that I really enjoy. I got pretty much everything for it when this Kickstarter came out, and then it did a lot like what I was talking about with Marvel Legendary. It bloated the game to the point where I didn't want it, and I sold all this stuff that came with it, and that was Arcadia Quest.
Okay.
I love Arcadia Quest, and there's a lot to do in the base box. There's a lot to do with the Beyond the Grave expansion that they already had. When they added this, they started adding all these extra mechanics and the angels and the ally, and all that jazz, that damnation stuff with the corrupt weapons and all that jazz. And it just started adding too much. And then when you add in, you got this plus with the pets expansion that was kind of weird and all that jazz. It was just like, it was just adding more stuff, and it didn't need to be added, really. I mean, this expansion to me was very unneeded, because I think the game was on its downward trend anyway at that point.
Yeah, probably.
And then like this, if you look at these tiles, like, the other one at least had the colorful stuff, and this one's it's just weird. It didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't like the whole angels and stuff that came in with this one, and everything, and it just the campaigns are so short anyway. When you play regular Arcadia Quest, it's a 6-game campaign, and everything that. I would prefer just to keep doing regular Arcadia Quest. But there's so many heroes out now, you're going to have different experiences when you play with it and everything anyway. And there was so much that came with this Kickstarter. Did you back this one at all?
Oh God, no. I
didn't think.
I've played this one, but no, I'm not a fan of Arcadia Quest.
Yeah,
so
I didn't think so. One of the other guys over in Joplin did, and they sold it immediately too. It was just like
Mhm.
it was just stuff that it wasn't really needed. Like they could have easily done like a smaller, if they wanted to bring this theme in, do a smaller expansion for it, other than making this massive Kickstarter with all this extra crap to go into it, and all these extra keywords and all these extra, all this just extra stuff. And
Mhm.
it just was just too much. So being a completionist is what puts me in this situation with a lot of these, if you haven't figured out. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much why it's on this list the way it is.
Yeah, good deal. Yeah, I would agree. I played one mission of this, and I was like, oh, this is still completely random. So no thanks.
I do want to try Arcadia Quest. I keep saying that. I want to try it because
Yeah,
the
I do
updated
too.
stuff.
I just don't want to pay for it.
I know. Maybe I'll find a cheap deal on it sometime and give it a
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah. All right, my number 2. This is basically the one example I really have of kind of a bundle of games, is that it wasn't one big chunk of money, but by the time it was all over, it ended up being a large chunk of money. And this one started off really good. Like the first 2-3 missions were super fun to play, and it had high hopes for this. And then it kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then my favorite one was like towards the end. I was like, oh man, this one's really good. And then it got worse and worse and ended horribly. So much so that it basically like it completely destroyed the entire experience. And this is technically, the base game is not at our minimum threshold, but I am lumping all of the expansions into
Just
one.
like what I did with Legendary. I mean,
right. I guess that's true. Yeah. So my number 2 is Time Stories.
Yep.
Time Stories. The only reason I ended up playing every single one of these was because it was way more fun because it was like Misery Loves Company. The 3 people I had played it with, we were just so miserable playing them, but we were miserable together, so we got to rag and shit on it together. But man, is it just awful. Like, I hate this game. The fact that, I mean, the first one, The Asylum, was, oh man, this is new, and then okay, that's kind of cool. And then the second one with the Marcy case was an interesting kind of, and it always had this this layer of a grander story, and they just kept blue balling you with that, and then never wrapped it up by the end. It was the fucking finale. Spoiler, I guess. The finale was an ad for their next Time Stories games. It was like what a way to shit in your mouth. It's like, hey, you wanted the final conclusion? Well, give us more money and we might give it to you. So yeah, the beginning was fine. It was fun, but then I hated the Groundhog experience, like the Groundhog Day experience of just, oh, this hour-long mission what the fuck? I don't remember that card. Damn, where was I? I probably should find that. I don't remember this at all, but it's just, they turned what should have been an hour-long mission into 2.5 hours, because it's like, oh, we ran out of time, start all over, which I never did. I'm like, no, we're gonna keep going. Like, yeah, thematically, you'd be like, well, going over to that building, we know not to really do better each time, but no, it's so awful as a game mechanism. But yeah, those dice on how you succeeded were trash. There were these light wooden plywood dice. Just the overall board aesthetic. I love the run of cards, how those kind of connected, and you kind of been like, oh, there's a guy talking to someone, I'm gonna go, and then you go over there, and depending on maybe who you are, you might have a better interaction. That's all well and good, but the missions, the individual boxes kept getting worse and worse and worse, and the overarching story was absolute, trash. So by the end of it, I mean, everyone tries to sell all their Time Story stuff and no one wants it, because hell, I would say not a lot of people like it, but the Time Stories Revelations, like their redone version, I think they've only done 2 missions, but I did the first one, and Kat and I had a good time. It was a streamlined version where what this should have been, where it was just very much clean, succinct, but you still got that feeling of jumping into a host body and interacting with a new era. I would recommend trying that. But huh? And yeah, and Bob does not exist. We fucking murdered him. He's dead. Like, yeah, he was such a piece of shit. But you never really knew why, because once again, they had this convoluted, half-assed, overarching story. But yeah, if it was just me and like not my closest friends playing this, I would have quit a long time ago. But we pushed on through and we did it. Yeah, that's my number 2, Time Stories.
All right, my number 2. I this would have been on my list, but I stopped buying it after the second expansion for the base box. So
after the Marcy case.
No, was the Marcy case the
Marcy case was number 2 because you had the Asylum came in the base box.
I meant so the Prophecy of Dragons was.
Okay. That's a lot of people's favorites, and that's where it really opened up into nonsense.
Yeah.
So and then it got worse.
So anyway,
the Arctic Expedition, the Cthulhu one is my favorite. I thought that was actually really good.
Yeah, and they broke some ground with this game because this was one of those first ones that did the scenarios where the box, all the components were used, same components used for different scenarios and stuff.
Yeah,
so they kind of dropped the ball a little bit.
No way of storing it. Oh yeah, they super dropped the ball. It's so bad.
And they needed more cards like that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, where that was Marie Berthollet. Play her every time.
All right, so my number 2 is also going to be a collection of games. It's Simon again.
Okay.
And I've spent many hundreds of dollars on this game up until a point. And I think what happened, and the bad thing is when I stopped buying this is when it actually started getting good.
Okay.
And that is Zombicide. I went all in on the first Kickstarter, all in on the second Kickstarter, all in on the third Kickstarter. They weren't really improving anything. It was just getting more and more convoluted, more and more stupid. So I stopped with right where I didn't do Black Plague. And then that actually was a decent one. So
yeah, that's where they fixed a lot of their main issues.
Right. So I had like Zombicide, and then there was like the second one was like Prison Outbreak and Toxic City Mall, I think. And then there was Rue Morgue and Angry Neighbors, where all those. And I had tool chests full of zombie miniatures, like just everywhere, coming out all over the place. And you get all those characters and everything. And then it was one of those things that just was the stupid mechanics, I mean, when you have to house rule multiple mechanics just to make the game better or more realistic, I guess, then there's an issue, and this was one of those. I was one of those suckers because this was one of the early Kickstarters that I did. I think the first Zombicide was 2012. And I went all in on it, and I was like, holy shit, I spent $175 or whatever it was to go all in on the first Zombicide. I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of money. This is my favorite game in the world. There's nothing wrong with this game. And there was. I mean, the whole shoot the order of who gets hit with bullets and crap and all that stuff first. And then the second one came out. Rules didn't update. They just added more types of zombies and added more mechanics. And then the third one came out and added more zombies and even more mechanics. And then I was done with that after that. And sold it for a big loss, but got rid of all of it. And then now I haven't played any of them since. I want to play Black Plague and Green Horde because I hear they've updated and fixed a lot of that stuff. And then I did go. Well, you and I both. We both went way overboard and bought everything for Marvel Zombies, including the massive
Galactus.
Galactus. So we're in.
Yeah, because I missed out on my giant Cthulhu, so I'm not missing out on this giant zombie Galactus.
So yeah, so I went from not backing anything to all of a sudden, hell yeah, Marvel and I was one of those when Marvel Zombies first was announced. I was like, I'm not gonna do that shit.
Yeah, fuck that.
And then I'm like, okay, after shipping and shit, it's gonna be like $700.
Yeah, yeah, like, and yeah, and to be fair, this list isn't like we haven't learned anything. This is just 10 games that we hated paying for, but it's like there's a bunch of others we paid for that are really good, but we're still risking big money.
Just wait for the next time we do this list in 5, 6, 7 years. So
I know. Yeah, the Marvel Zombicide will be number 2 for you. No, but that's the thing. It's like actually that game company or that gaming store having that offer of
that's awesome.
And I was like, I wouldn't have paid for that otherwise.
Right, yeah, me either.
So yeah, this is a good one. I don't know what your number 1 is. I'm curious because my number 1 should be super obvious.
Oh, yeah. When you first brought this up as a list, I pretty much knew what this was going to be.
Yeah, it was my number 1. Then I had to figure out where 2 through 10 went, or 2 through 11 technically. So what's my number 1?
It's KDM.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's that stupid boring. Remember, this is like the others. Remember the.
It board? Does look like the others. You're right. Oh my god. We need to do a video on a Simon conspiracy. Like they recycled. I guarantee you this. Like what they took is these boards and just kind of maybe they flipped where a room was.
Yeah,
they recycle their games.
Yep. Anyway,
well, we knew that from Zombicide because they have Western Zombicide, and then at least Marvel Zombicide that is a legitimate comic fucking thing.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So anyway, yes.
Yeah, my number 1 is KDM without a doubt. This is easily over. I mean, the base game itself is $400. That hits our minimum of $150. You can't even find every single expansion without paying like an exuberant amount of money. I sold I had everything for it, and I didn't even have some of the promo stuff. Like my collection only consisted of actual stuff that could be put into the game, and I sold it for about $3,000. My friend who still has everything for this game and even recognizes all my complaints with it, but still just has it. He has all the pinups. He has 3D terrain. He has like everything that is out for this game. He pretty much has. And I still play the game with him because I don't have a $3,000 tie into this game anymore. A big portion of what makes this game so stomach churning is the amount of money and how many problems. And then the community for this game are like right up there with your fucking COD players. They're just cancer. It's a cancerous community. I just do not enjoy talking to anyone who loves this game because this is a true mental disorder if you're saying this game is perfect. Like it has positives without a doubt. It has one of the coolest themes and lore for a board game that I can think of. That's easily my biggest praise for it. It has a cool AI system, but also everything with this game is a double-edged sword. I'm not gonna keep talking about this. I've done 3 discussions on this game. You can watch as my mental decline happened of this game being a 10 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10 all the way down to a 4 out of 10, and that's where it's probably staying. Nope. Yeah, so this was easily my biggest buyer's remorse. At least I made money off of it, but I just wish I had never brought up the idea of, because me and 2 of my friends shared the price of the base game. So we went in, I think, what would that be? $133 each.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had never brought that up because then I would have never had to suffer through this. So
I got to say that the badass miniatures that you had built up on your shelves when you did own it were pretty cool.
No, the minis when put together are phenomenal, but there's always a but with this game. It's like, but there's better minis for other games you don't have to put together. It's like everyone says it's a lifestyle game. No, it's not, because a lifestyle game allows you to play it for a lifestyle, and this is very limited playability. The business model from Adam Poots is just a big middle finger to his backers. It's like the sweet joy I would get if he fucking never fulfilled wave 3 and 4, would just like that would be so like justice for me. But we'll see. I mean, people are gonna keep sucking at the teat of this game. If it comes out in 10 years, they finally get their wave 3 and 4 stuff, people will be like, see, like I wasn't delusional. It's like, yeah, I guess not. You did get the game. You got the 2015 year game in 2025. Good for you.
Yep.
But yeah, this is my number one game, Buyer's Remorse, KDM.
All right. My number one is another CMON game.
This is a crossover?
Yes.
Massive Darkness?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
This one is up here because I went all in on this, even to the point before I played it, I bought all of the wooden inserts from Go 7 Gaming and put them all together. So, and there wasn't an all-in one box sortage deal, so there was like wooden for the box, one for the exclusives box.
Ew.
Little wooden things for each of those little expansion boxes that had like that the bird and the heroes. So I put all this wood together, put them all in the expansion box, so it didn't even save space, right? So it's just organized.
You could have kept the trays.
It just organized them all. So I bought all in on this. I bought all the wooden expansions for it. This looked awesome. Like if you just looked at the stuff, like it says it uses the popular Zombicide system, and when I backed this, I still wasn't super salty on Zombicide necessarily, and plus it was fantasy and all that stuff, and it had those light and dark mechanics, and then it just turned out to be what we talked about earlier. It turned out to be not really a good game at all.
Just a dice rolling mob fight, of repetitive nature.
And I have no desire at all, because of this game, to touch I'm going to, because I'll play the second one because I don't have to pay for it. But
yeah,
I'll try.
I'll play any game as long as I don't have to pay for it.
but I'll, as soon as they said, "Oh, we're doing Massive Darkness Hellscape" or whatever the hell it's called, it's like, okay, nah, I'm not gonna back that. I'm not gonna.
I didn't even look at it. Like, unlike with Marvel Zombicide, like I eventually started keeping up with that Kickstarter because I was like, oh my god, there's so many heroes. But yeah, with Massive Darkness 2, I was like, I could not care less.
Right. And we had talked about earlier about the designers. And it looks like
it is the same.
It's the same. Lewin. Yeah, it's the same three people.
Same team.
So I don't know, man. I mean, it's I went all in on this, and that's one thing I need to start doing more, and to stop games coming on this list is to do more research on them prior to spending all that money on them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially this one, because I didn't back this on Kickstarter. It's not like I bought an all-in pledge off of a guy,
Yeah.
So I had time to research and stuff more now and everything. So, but yeah, this one just sucked ass. And then what to make it even worse is when I sold this stupid thing, it weighed a metric ton because of all the wood that done. And then I shipped it to a guy that bought it in California, and it got hung up in San Francisco for like 4 or 5 days and wasn't moving anywhere.
Yeah.
And then when it got delivered to the guy, he opened it up and was pissed off because all that was in the box was a blanket.
That's right.
And he thought I was trying to rip him off. And I'm like, no, I was like,
here's the weight on my receipt.
Right.
Blanket weight.
So there was all this back and forth going. So we ended up just, each of us sucked half the cost. And
ouch.
And stuff.
We never got it.
No. So
Oh, that
he ended up,
sucks.
I gave him half the money back because I finally convinced him that it wasn't my deal.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think
such.
I've learned I'm doing like a weight limit on games I ship because my too many bones showed up all
Mhm.
fucked up. And then the guy luckily was nice and he knew I didn't send that to him, but he was out. I mean, he wasn't really out of the game, it just was busted up.
Yeah.
And luckily eBay eventually stepped in and they gave him his money back and I didn't have to pay for it. But I'm like, I told him, I'm like, dude, I'm not paying you back. Like, I'm not going to be out of game and $700. That's just not happening. So, yeah, yeah. Hell, you actually, luckily, I think what the post office did is they intentionally held this from him because they didn't want another person to suffer.
Well, and one thing, I think the biggest thing I've learned in shipping is I just never go through the post office. I do UPS for everything now.
Yeah, well, UPS is the one that fucked up my too many bones.
Really,
So
really
they all
interesting.
suck. They're all awful.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's my number one.
Yeah.
I finished my trilogy of shit with Simon.
Yeah, it's
Which is
interesting. I did not realize out of our 1, 2, 3, 4, out of our 22 games, realistically, we had 6 Simon games, which doesn't really sound like a lot, but it's a lot more than you'd think. Like,
I had 4 on mine.
you had 4. I had 3. I guess it's 7 total because you had Massive Darkness as well. But
Yeah.
and then yeah, we had 3 Steam Forged
Yeah.
games. So it's
Yeah,
really
it was,
just these.
Yeah, it was just something, I mean, like with this how it goes. And it's funny because Simon, one of my favorite games of all time, is a Simon game. So it's like you said, they hit really hard, or hit really well occasionally, but most of the time it's like just doesn't work.
Yeah. So that's it, everyone. Those are our top 10 buyer's remorse games. Let us know what your buyer's remorse situations are in the comments below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.